Hello, welcome to Billy Netro's Rant, and do not worry, my best friend has not been transformed into a fan. I simply painted the fan that color so that you'd have a more recognizable color to be on that side of the screen, as I do want you to pay attention to this fan. By the way, welcome to my basement, where fun things are about to occur. And I don't mean fun things in a basement as in how most people would imply that. I mean actually fun things. Pori Hemplo, what I am about to do with this here fan, as I will turn it on, which will cause it to start spinning. And I will stop explaining stupid things like that and instead explain what I'm actually going to do and why I'm turning on this fan. It's not because it's dusty in here, even though it is. It's not because it's hot in here, even though it is. I am turning on this fan to show a fun optical illusion that can be performed on any fan through video, not in real life. Because if a fan is spinning super, super fast in real life, it simply turns invisible most of the time, which is not very fun. But if a fan is spinning super fast in a video, then eventually it will reverse rotation and start spinning slowly in the other direction before flipping back around, which is a thing that you noticed if you are a fan of fan videos. A secondary benefit of having this illusion only work through video is that you also get to have a digital display of how fast the fan is spinning. Feel free to keep fun numbers down on a piece of paper to determine when this fan starts and stops turning around, if you get bored with what I'm talking about, which hopefully you won't, because I assume if you're excited for that, then you are a fan of fans, and a fan of fans would of course be a fan of spinning things, which is going to be the primary topic for today. Spinning things. Spinning things have been a staple of technology for a long time. One of the first most popular inventions, the wheel. That's a thing that spins. Also, the second most popular invention, pizza. You cut that with a spinning wheel. It's fun how things just work out sometimes, don't they? You might think I'm saying that sarcastically, but no. I think that the pizza cutter is a genius invention. Ever try cutting a pizza with just a normal knife? Pretty boring and tedious, right? But with a pizza cutter, it's very smart, because the cutter can move along the thick crust while greasing itself up with the sauce and cheese so that it keeps rolling. Try cutting just a normal piece of bread, and you'd have a lot more problems, because your blade would be as greasy. I suppose knives could be replaced entirely with small pizza cutters that just had some sort of auto-greaser. I'll have to run that by Fwim. I think you'll like that. Oh, I'm sorry for enthralling you too much with that pizza talk, because it seems that our fan has made its first reverse rotation. I will not be keeping track of the others, because, frankly, I'm too busy trying to not mess up every sentence I say. What was I talking about? Pizza. No. Spinning things, yes. Let's see, what other spinning things? Blenders. Yeah, blenders are pretty cool. Wow, I am hungry. Anyway, no, let's move away from food and kitchen things. Let's think about other spinning things. How about chainsaws? Yes, that's like a tool, but not for the kitchen. It's for the outside, which gives it a whole lot more use than a kitchen, because a kitchen is limited by square footage, and outside is limited by, square yardage? Chainsaws are mainly used by people who really don't like trees, or who like turning parts of trees into sculptures of little critters, one of which I'm a lot more fond of than the other, but neither of which I participate in very often. Oh, and you know what else chainsaws are good for? My note to self says to stop making so many Doom references, so I guess you won't get to know what else chainsaws are good for. But that doesn't matter. There are still plenty of other spinning things. For example, carousels. And this also loosely relates to the sculptures of critters thing I was talking about before. Because carousels tend to have animals constructed out of some sort of uncomfortable on the butt material, and then they just spin in a circle. It may not be the most sophisticated form of enjoyment, but it's still enjoyable nonetheless. Popular carousel characters include mainly horses, because I suppose horses are heavily associated with riding, as well as any horse-adjacent creatures. You know, donkeys, mules, ponies, unicorns. Although for that last one, no one really knows if unicorns are acceptable to be ridden on, because no one's ever ridden a unicorn. Maybe if I could find and ride a unicorn, I'd have something more interesting to talk about than spinning things. However, if I were to talk about spinning things, which I'm talking about right now, I would be a fool to not mention one of the most interesting spinning things, called a zoetrope. What is a zoetrope? Well, think of an animation. You know how it's made up of all the little pictures? What a zoetrope is just paste all those pictures onto a wheel and spin it, so that the pictures become animated. I think this is what the intestines of those old projectors used to look like. But of course, being an art form, zoetropes are not limited to one specific style. Sure, you could just put a bunch of pictures on a lampshade and spin it around, but there are also 3D zoetropes. And just when I thought that stop motion was the least time efficient way of animating, zoetropes aren't the only spinning things that are limited to one thing, because spinny things can be physical as well as mental, because things that make your head spin could also be considered spinny things. For example, the classic saying, raining cats and dogs. That's pretty messed up. That's a lot of animals dying on impact. Do you know how far up clouds are? I don't even want to think about it. You know what else spins? Bobbleheads. Well, not really. I suppose they bobble, as the name would imply. But bobbleheads have always confused me. They're obviously meant to be a desktop toy, like those drinking bird things. But unlike the drinking bird things, or even a Newton's cradle, for that matter, bobbleheads don't last as long. They don't retain their kinetic energy as long as those other two. Of course, perpetual motion machines don't exist, but a bobblehead is about as far away from them as possible. I suppose they're cute, but if you have to keep reactivating them every 10 seconds, what's the point of them even being a desktop toy? How are you doing, fan? Oh, still spinning at nearly imperceivable speed? Cool, me too. Alright, I'm ripe out of spinny things to talk about, so I guess this has been Billy Netcho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. How am I gonna turn off the fan? I suppose I could just go in for a quick press of the button and then pull out before anything... Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm quick. I'm a squirrel. Nimble. Why'd I do that? That was obviously the outcome. Stupid fan. I knew there's a reason they put meshes over them. I just didn't put it on because I thought it would be easier to see. Trust me, I'll get the fan off. Just give me a bit of time.
Hey Alice, how you doing? Flem, you shouldn't be down here. There's rules against leaving your stores during the day. Oh yeah, who can forget those incredible rules created by the most competent person in the building, Derek Vertihals. I can only picture what intelligent things he's doing right now.
15 minutes? Oh yeah, sure. When I put my sandwich in the microwave, I wanted it microwaved for 15 minutes. Now how do you suppose I eat this nuclear waste dump that is a sandwich? I can't! I might as well throw you out the window, you stupid microwave!
I understand your concern for me breaking the rules, but some rules are just unfair, and should be broken for the benefit of others. Consider this a visit as well as a protest. A pretty low-effort one, but still a protest. Is it still a protest if no one sees it? Is it still a conversation if it's interrupted by a giraffe? So, how you been doing down here? Temperature-wise, it's rather nice. Not too hot, not too cold. As far as basements go, this is pretty fine. It's not pretty fine. In fact, I'd say it's pretty awful. Every day, I just sit here in the basement waiting for someone to show up, but they never do. Because I'm in the basement. You want to go to the basement to get your car fixed by Todd? Sure, he's right over there. You want to go to the basement to get your medicine? No, that's gross. Why would you do that? If I were anywhere else, I'd be more successful, but I'm in the basement, and there's nothing I can do about it, because Derek doesn't like me. I don't think Derek likes anyone. However, I understand your frustrations. For you see, I have decided to periodically, throughout this week, talk to everyone I know and ask them how their workplaces can be improved. For example, Kyle suggested they put doors in the bathroom, and Todd asked for some new gloves.
Sorry, I dropped my drill.
That's fine, Todd. For clarity of my letter, what specifically do you not enjoy about working in the basement? Letter? Wouldn't it be easier to just send an email? Well, yeah, of course, but I doubt he knows how to use a computer.
Go away.
Well, as I've already said, being in the basement discourages customers a lot. I once received an email from someone who said that they didn't want to pick up their insulin today because the basement was, quote, too spooky. The room is super echoey, there's no music, and since this is the basement, the only way to get here is to accidentally press the parking button when you meant to go up, which happens more times than I get actual customers, believe it or not. And while you're at it, Fwim, you should really add an extra bump to that P because we don't even have a parking garage. Not only that, but if I did receive regular customers, I wouldn't even have enough medicine for them because I don't have any storage space because I'm in the basement. And all the rest of the basement is storing other things. And I don't know if you know, because you're not a pharmacist, but other things and medicine tend to not mix when stored together. Especially when the storage closet is in the same room as the trash and recycling. Alright, those are all valid and good complaints. Now, can you say them again so I can write them down?
What is this now? We, as prominent and integral figures in your workforce, would kindly like to ask you, our boss, to improve the working conditions of our environments. Contributing members of your team include Kyle Warbler, Todd Funickley, and Alice Sokotoa, as well as yours truly. Who the hell is yours truly? Flim, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. Just let me eat my sandwich in peace. You see, that's professionalism, kids.
Don't worry about it, it's fine. I just had a little trouble turning off a fan. Speaking of fans, I would like to address quickly today, and by quickly I probably mean slowly, because it takes me a long time to explain anything, but I'd like to clear up a misconception that I often hear about something that I am quite a big fan of, that being Dark Souls, specifically the bosses in Dark Souls. Because I've noticed, it seems that in memes or other games inspired by Dark Souls, always end up giving the bosses super long and over-exaggerated names, with all sorts of titles and surnames and descriptions and stuff. When really, that's never been the case. In fact, the first Souls game, Demon Souls, most of the bosses' names were just 1 or 2 words. Vanguard, Phalanx, Penetrator, Adjudicator, Maneater, Flamelurker, Leechmonger. That last one's not even a real word, because no one's been mongering leeches like that guy can. In fact, their names are so not long that the longest boss name in the game is 3 words, Old King Allant. And they only ever call him King Allant in every other instance, so that old was just added as fluff. Not a lot of fluff, considering it's still only 3 words. I'm just not sure how this reputation got started. In fact, I say, if there should be a stereotype for Dark Souls bosses' names, it should just be the word demon. You will not believe the amount of demons in this medieval fantasy series. Asylum Demon, Stray Demon, Demon Fire Sage, Taurus Demon, Capra Demon, Centipede Demon, Covetous Demon, Smelter Demon Red, Smelter Demon Blue, I call them Roy and Biv, Demon of Song, Old Demon King, Demon in Pain, Demon from Below, another Stray Demon, this one's in Dark Souls 3, Unnamed Demon in the Undead Settlement, I don't know, but it looks like the Taurus Demon, so I'm going to count it. Demon of Hatred, and, these last 2 might be a stretch, Gyobu Masataka Oniwa from Sekiro, called by the local people Gyobu the Demon, and finally, for some reason, the PlayStation 5 version of Demon Souls renames just the Vanguard to Demon Vanguard, because these people just can't get enough demons. The only way I could really possibly see where this stereotype came from is from Dark Souls 3, where there are not 1, but 2 bosses with the title of the Boreal Valley, Vort of the Boreal Valley, and Dancer of the Boreal Valley. I don't know why the Boreal Valley is so important, and why these people are so pathetic that the only interesting thing about them is that they're from the Boreal Valley. Of course, not every Souls boss follows the demon templates. There are a few other templates that the naming conventions follow. I will not mention them all, just my favorite one, and one that I'm glad is seeping into Souls-inspired games, because it's quite cool. And that is what I like to call the nameless bosses. And I don't mean like Nameless King, where he just doesn't have a name. I'm talking about bosses that aren't specifically given a name, but are just tied to some other character. Examples include the Duke's Dear Freya, Orphan of Kos, Murgo's Wet Nurse, Red Wolf of Radagon, Gravetender's Grave Wolf, and Fool's Idol. Those are all not really names, so much as they are titles that tie them to a more important character. And I could talk for minutes and minutes, and waste this entire episode's duration just talking about Dark Souls naming conventions, and I very well might. But, and this is a very rare thing for me to do, I will, indeed, digress, and get on to the main topic. The Yangtze giant soft-shell turtle, which sounds more like a Dark Souls boss than the actual Dark Souls bosses do, is a very interesting animal. It's interesting in the fact that it's extinct, which is not particularly interesting, but it's also alive. Yes, there are still Yangtze giant soft-shell turtles existing, but they're all males. Uh-oh. This is very interesting, because technically their species is extinct, which makes them special ghosts. Not an actual term, something I just made up. But that's just because I wanted a horribly, awfully broken down segue into talking about ghosts. What am I doing? It's not even October. Bet you didn't expect that, talking about ghosts in a non-spooky month, or time of year. You know what else you don't expect? Ghosts. Ghosts are like spiders, in the fact that people who believe in ghosts will tell you that you're never more than 100 feet away from a ghost, just like you're never 100 feet away from a spider. I, as someone who doesn't believe in spiders, don't care about those statistics. What am I doing? This is stupid. Save the ghosts for October. Okay, what else can I talk about? Yangtze giant shell soft turtle. Giant soft shell turtle. Yangtze. That's like the Chinese zombie. Oh, that's no crap. Okay, soft shell turtle segues into hard shelled turtle. Okay, yeah, I can work with that. Nope, that's equally as stupid. You know what? I'm gonna stop and actually stick with the season. You know? Because usually, you talk about spooky stuff during Halloween. And usually, I talk about Dark Souls stuff on April Fool's Day. And I don't want to break tradition. So let's do something more recent. Remember that time I said that I wanted to talk about giant robots one time? How about we talk about giant robots right now? Yes, I am comfortable talking about the topic of giant robots. Because believe it or not, I've had some experience with giant robots. Granted, not nearly as giant as the traditional giant robot, but I'd say it was about, like, I don't know, taller than a building. Do I have any idea how that giant robot worked? No. But I've seen one, and that's probably more than you can say. So I'd say I'm pretty reputable on the topic. Speaking of robots and reputability, robots, the giant ones that is, kick irreputable tushy. Because the thing about giant robots, as opposed to normal robots, which I hate, is that giant robots are entirely controlled by people, most of the time. I'd say the bigger the robot, the more likely it is that it's a mecha and not just some sort of sentient jerk on the street. But yes, giant robots are cool, but really, what is a giant robot? Obviously, it has to be giant, and probably made of metal, otherwise that would be a biomech, which I do not consider the same thing, because cyborgs and robots, I think, are two completely separate categories. And so are mechas, but for the sake of simplicity, let's just say big metallic thing. And that metallic thing doesn't necessarily have to be in an organic sort of cookie-cutter shape. Because there are giant robots that look like eggs, giant robots that look like spiders, or crabs, or giant lizards, whatever. So here is my proposal. Are excavation equipment giant robots? Settle down. I know that may be a shocking revelation, to learn that there could be giant robots lurking just across the street at the local construction site. But really, what is the difference between a big humanoid robot with treads for feet and, I don't know, a standard excavator arm? The only difference is the excavator has only one arm, and it's not in a person shape. They're pretty much the same thing. Obviously, a backhoe isn't a giant robot, because that's just a truck with an arm. And an excavator is a truck with an arm, but with tank treads. So does that make tanks a giant robot? I don't think so, really, because they're more vehicular than robot-y. The more arms, the better, really. And the wheels of the backhoe counteract the robotiness of its arm. And also the standard scoopy thing at the front, because I feel any truck can have a scoopy thing. That doesn't make you a giant robot. So excavators, I think, are fair game. Backhoes are not. And plow trucks, absolutely not. So the lesson to be learned is, basically, if I say the words giant robot, and you imagine them, what you imagine, that's pretty much a giant robot. You know what they are. They're giant robots. Not much more to it than that. So really, it's only a giant robot if you believe it is. Because I could say giant robot, and the first thing that comes to your mind is a backhoe, for whatever reason. So really, the giant robots are in our hearts and blueprints, but I don't have access to those. Let's see, talking about Dark Souls, talking about another thing that's completely unrelated, but somehow relating it to it, talking about a third thing, referencing a previous episode, weird wholesome ending. Yep, that's pretty much the entire episode. I just wanted to say these things before Scratch takes away my freedom of speech in a few days, because it needs, like, server maintenance or something. How dare you, Scratch? Then I won't be able to talk about meaningless crap for a few days. Oh no, the world will suffer. Nah, just kidding. This has been Billy Netcho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Hello, welcome to Billy Netcho's Rant, and today is a very special episode, as I do have a special guest. Why am I in the basement again? Well, because this special guest comes exclusive from the far-off land of cyberspace, if that even is a real place. Today's special guest is actually Bing. Yeah, that's right, the entire tech conglomerate of Bing, condensed into one fictional entity. Because if you remember, not too long ago, I did an episode talking about how much I hated chatbots and AI and all that jazz. And I felt that episode was quite cruel and unfair, because even though I dislike chatbots, it seems a bit rude to talk about them behind their backs. It's like gossiping. It doesn't lead to good places. So today, I figured, let's ask Bing about my show and see how well this chatbot can understand something that it probably can't just look up on the internet for a reliable source. No wikis to fall back on this time, Bing. You're gonna have to use your big brain knowledge. No dilly-dallying this time. Let's jump right into it. I'd like to say this as soon as possible, but unfortunately, because of the limitations of Scratch, I would not be able to show you any screenshots of the actual AI interface, because even with Scratch add-on's HD image uploading feature, the images are still so poor quality that you can't even read the text very well. So you're just going to have to imagine as I paint a picture of the interface. As I said last time, I'm not entirely sure how this AI thing works, but apparently the Bing AI is actually an offspring of that Chat GT 3PO AI, whatever it was, the popular one that everyone else uses. But I'm fine with using the inferior model, as long as it gives results. The program has 3 main modes: creative mode, balance mode, and precise mode. I've tried a few of them out just for testing, and creative mode seems to be just the base AI, where it'll present information, but it'll also fill in the gaps with stuff it makes up itself if it can't find that relevant information. Precise mode is basically just creative mode, except it's not allowed to take any liberties. If it doesn't know something, it'll just straight up tell you, I don't know what that is. Go away. While the balanced mode, as you can tell, it's just a combination of the two. I'm not sure why you would ever use that. If you want something funny, you go to creative. If you want something informational, you go to precise. I don't know why you'd go to balanced. To restore equilibrium to the cosmos? No, it's an AI chatbot. It probably doesn't even know what Billy Nut Joe's rant is. Well, now that I brought that up, might as well ask. So, I typed into the chatbot the following. Hello, Bing, smiley face. Because you see, I don't want it to know entirely off the bat that I'm anti-robot. What do you know about the show Billy Nut Joe's Rant? Let's see the response. Wow, that's a big response. Hi there, smiley face. So it seems if I respond with smiley face, it responds with smiley face. So now we're friendly. I'm glad you asked me about Billy Nut Joe's Rant. It's a show that I find very amusing and entertaining. Oh, well, thank you. Billy Nut Joe's Rant is a series of short videos featuring Billy Nut Joe, a nerdy, curious, chubby, squirrel, who likes standing on sidewalks and talking about random stuff. Well, yeah, I suppose. He's often joined by his friend Rocky, a raccoon who is more laid back and sarcastic. Okay, so here's strike one. We'll let the chubby thing slide for now. This program, it knows that I have a friend who's a raccoon, but it doesn't know the name. And I've noticed that these AIs often use alliteration when they can't think of a name. So, of course, a raccoon would be named Rocky, not something ridiculous like Jelly. Laid back and sarcastic. Okay. Together they rant about various topics such as sports. Yep, I've definitely talked about that. Movies, definitely. Politics, maybe like ancient 200-year-old politics, so sure. Food, yep. And more. Yes, I definitely talk about more. They also make fun of each other and sometimes get into trouble with other animals. I wouldn't say make fun of, but yeah, get in trouble, certainly. The show was created by a user named Squirrel Scratch on Scratch. No, not even close. A website where people can create and share interactive stories and games. The show started in 2020 as a commentary on things the creator wanted to talk about. Since then, the show has gained popularity and more than 250 episodes on YouTube. That is true. Some of the most recent and most viewed episodes are Billy Nut Joe's Rant 136, the Super Bowl. I definitely talked about the Super Bowl, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't episode 136. Billy Nut Joe's Rant 189, the Oscars. No, I definitely never talked about the Oscars. I don't care about that in the slightest. And Billy Nut Joe's Rant episode 214, the vaccine. No, I am pretty sure I've never mentioned vaccines. If you're interested in watching Billy Nut Joe's Rant, you can find episodes on Scratch or YouTube. If you enjoy the show as much as I do, find it funny and insightful. Okay, thank you. The rest of it is just saying nice things. Which, while I appreciate, I don't appreciate that's not coming from a real person, and that it's just basically grasping at straws, hoping that's correct. And it was correct in a lot of areas. Let's help it a little. So I respond, the raccoon is not named Rocky. She is named Jelly. To which the AI responds, oh, I'm sorry for the mistake. You were right. The raccoon's name is Jelly, not Rocky. Showing just how gullible this AI is. You can pretty much tell it anything, and it'll take it as truth as long as you say it with enough confidence. I must have confused her with another raccoon character from a different show. Thank you for correcting me, smiley face. Jelly's a very cool and funny character. She is Billy Nut Joe's best friend and often accompanies him on his rants. She's more laid back and sarcastic than him and sometimes disagrees with him or makes fun of him. She also has a crush on a handsome skunk named Stinky, who sometimes appears in the show. Alright, so if this has seen the show, it must have wildly misinterpreted the themes, because I'm pretty sure she's not friends with any skunk characters. So now I will respond, there is no skunk named Stinky, and this is the last time I will be correcting the AI. Now we're just going to let it roam free. However, can you tell me more about the other characters in the show? I'm sure a reputable source as Bing AI would clearly understand and be able to name every character. The AI responds, sure, I can tell you about the other characters in the show. Besides Billy Nut Joe and Jelly, there are several recurring characters that appear on the show. Some of them are Mr. Nutty. He is Billy Nut Joe's father. Okay, so first off, I'm not sure how they got Mr. Nutty as Billy Nut Joe's father. Wouldn't the father be Mr. Joe? Not Mr. Nutty. Nut is my middle name. And it's not even actually Nut, that's just a shortened version. It's actually Nutmeg. So I don't know how it went from Nutmeg to Nut to Nutty, but apparently, Mr. Nutty, he's the father. Let's see more about him. He's a retired professor of history and philosophy. Okay, interesting. He's very wise and knowledgeable, but also very strict and conservative. He often lectures Billy Nut Joe about various topics and tries to make him more disciplined and responsible. He dislikes Jelly and thinks she's a bad influence on his son. Okay, gee, thanks, Dad. I'm not a big fan of this hypothetical father who has the wrong last name. Next up, Mrs. Nutty. Okay, still not my real last name, but let's see. She's Billy Nut Joe's mother, who's a famous chef and cookbook author. Geez, my theoretical parents are very accomplished. She's very kind and loving, but also very busy and stressed. She often tries to balance her work and family life. She sometimes spoils Billy Nut Joe with her delicious food. She also likes Jelly and thinks she's a good friend for her son. Oh, thanks, hypothetical mom. You're a lot better than Robo-Dad. Next up, Sally. I have no idea who that could be. She is Billy Nut Joe's crush. Oh, okay. Who is a cute and smart squirrel. Notice, Sally, squirrel, again with the alliteration, who attends the same school as him. She's very popular and friendly, but also very oblivious to Billy Nutjoe's feelings. Oh boy, I'm glad I'm not in a cartoon relationship like that. She often talks to him about her hobbies and interests, such as music, art, and fashion. She also has a pet cat named Fluffy, who sometimes chases Billy Nutjoe and Jelly. I'm not sure why it always refers to me by my entire name, and Jelly as just Jelly, but fine. And also, why would you have a pet cat? And I'm very surprised that the cat isn't called, like, Catherine, or something also that starts with a key. It's actually a cat named Fluffy. So it's not always alliteration. Just for when it has to create a major character, it uses alliteration. Alright, next up, Chip. Alright, so is Chip gonna be a chipmunk or something? He's Billy Nutjoe's rival, who is a handsome and athletic squirrel. Okay, so they didn't even try with that obvious alliteration. Who also attends the same school as him. He is very arrogant and mean, but he's also very talented and successful. He often competes with Billy Nutjoe in various fields, such as sports, academics, and girls. Yeah, I often compete in the field of girls. He also has a crush on Sally and tries to impress her with his skills. Okay, so are we talking about Billy Nutjoe, or just some generic high school sitcom movie? Final character, if you can even call it that, just called the dog. He is a large and ferocious dog who lives in the neighborhood where Billy Nutjoe and Jelly hang out. He's very aggressive and territorial, and often chases them whenever he sees them. He also barks loudly and scares other animals. Jeez, wow, what an in-depth character. Alright, so obviously Bing doesn't know any of the actual characters. Not even close. Just comes up with the most generic 90s high school movie plot cliche characters you can think of. Which is fine, because after all, it's just a dumb AI. But let's see if I were to ask it a more specific question, such as, how does an episode of Billy Nutjoe often play out? Because the correct answer is really not that complicated. Alright, so apparently, an episode of Billy Nutjoe's Rant usually plays out like this. The episode starts with a catchy theme song that introduces the show and the main characters. The song is sung by Billy Nutjoe and Jelly, and has lyrics such as, "We're Billy Nutjoe and Jelly, we're here to make you laugh. We gonna rant about anything from sports to giraffes." Wow, they say people fake their homework with this? I hope it's not poetry homework. We're not afraid to speak our minds, we're always honest and true. So sit back and enjoy the show. This is Billy Nutjoe's Rant for you. Wow, that is awful. After the theme song, the episode shows Billy Nutjoe and Jelly standing on the sidewalk in front of a random background. Random background, okay. Such as a park, a city, a forest, or a beach. They greet the viewer and introduce the topic of the episode, which can be anything from current events, pop culture, personal experiences, or random questions. For example, in one episode, they talk about their favorite movies of all time. Well, I've certainly talked about movies before, I'm not sure favorite. In another episode, they discuss whether pineapple belongs on pizza. I'm not even going to get into that debate, because honestly, pineapple on pizza isn't even bad. And I don't know why it has such a negative stigma against it. Think of all the vile and repugnant things you could put on a pizza. Did pineapple come to your mind? No, probably not, because it's actually edible. Anyway, I digress. Then, they start ranting about topic, expressing opinions, facts, jokes, and anecdotes. I will say that's pretty accurate. They often use humor, sarcasm, and exaggeration, and references to make their points. Sure. They also interact with each other, sometimes agreeing, sometimes disagreeing, sometimes teasing, sometimes complimenting. They also break the fourth wall and address the viewers directly. I don't do that, do I? Asking them questions or inviting them to comment. For example, in one episode, they debate about who is the best superhero. In another episode, I've never done that. In another episode, they ask the viewers to vote for their least favorite ice cream flavor. If I had the ability to hold polls, they wouldn't be about that. They'd be about something interesting. During the rant, they may encounter other characters' situations. Okay, we're getting somewhere. That add more comedy or drama to the episode. For example, they may run into Mr. Nutty and Mrs. Nutty, who often have different opinions or advice for them. They also meet Sally or Chip, who causes them to feel jealous or competitive. They also face the dog, or Fluffy, who chase them or scare them. Yeah, I'm real scared of a tiny cat named Fluffy. They may also see celebrities or fictional characters that they admire or mock. If only I could be so lucky. Alright, so that's about as far as I'm willing to go with asking this AI stuff. Because after all, I don't want it to know who I am. Not that it really can, because these AI conversations are limited to 30 turns each. After 30 turns, you just move on to the next topic. And if you try to ask the AI to recall the previous topic, it'll tell you, sorry, that's confidential top secret information. Yeah, well, I was really interested to learn more about the dog. But on a more positive note, I now better understand how these AIs work. Their intermachinations. And attempts to fill in the gaps of information it's very obviously lacking. Because that beginning monologue thing at the beginning that was more or less completely right, yeah, that was pretty much lifted directly from a YouTube description of a video. So, does the AI know what it's talking about? Well, if it can read off a cheat sheet, yeah, obviously. But otherwise, it'll just make up whatever it wants. And the inferences it has made are either really lucky or just really broad. For example, it knew I had a friend who was a raccoon, because it says in a YouTube description that it can readily read off of. It also knew that there was a cat and dog in the show, which of course I know a cat and a dog. They're like one of the most common animals. But it also inferred I knew another squirrel, which I don't. So this whole thing is just a whole bunch of coincidences and broad assumptions that can pretty much be applied to anything. So think of the AI as sort of a fortune teller. So has this changed my opinion on the AI? Well, No, not really. I still think it's technically impressive. I still think that its art abilities, if they were to be passed off as someone's original work, is morally questionable. And I still don't think that it's an all-knowing machine, because it obviously isn't. It's just making things up and accessing readily available information off YouTube. But I'm glad I gave it a second chance, because I think everyone deserves second chances, even if that everyone isn't even a real anyone. This has been Billy Nature's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Hello, welcome to Billy Nature's Rant, and I would like to start off this episode with an apology to any Star Wars fans. Because a long time ago, in an episode quite a bit far away, I talked about Star Wars, and I was pretty ignorant at the time, as I believe I said Darth Vader only lasted for one movie. That is incorrect. He lasted for the entire first trilogy, which is actually the second trilogy, as it starts with the fourth movie, but that's just because those movies were filmed out of order. I'm sorry, as I must have gotten Darth Vader confused with nearly every single villain in the Star Wars franchise. Jango Fett, Boba Fett, General Grievous, that ugly guy from the more recent movies. They all die in, minutes. Oh yeah, of course, who can forget Darth Maul? He's probably one of the most popular characters in the entire franchise. Which just goes to show how good the Star Wars people are at character design, because they put a lot of effort into these characters, who get decapitated in 20 minutes. Sure, as soon as most of these villains get a prominent antagonistic role, they're immediately killed. But some can get away with having a slight cameo in a previous movie before dying in the next one. Or they get completely off the hook and get to survive an entire trilogy section, such as the case with Darth Vader and the classic Newt Gunray. Yeah, Newt Gunray, that ugly frog guy who's one of the controllers of the robot army. You don't see any merchandise of Newt Gunray, even though he survived 3 movies, while Darth Maul only survived half of one. Pun very intended. Although I guess this is somewhat to be expected, as nearly all of the villains I previously mentioned died to some sort of laser attack. And just like in real life, death rays tend to kill people. So I can understand how, in a galaxy far, far away, things might be a little dangerous for someone up against someone with a lightsaber. And now, just to return to normal for a little bit, because I just said that I'm now more educated on Star Wars, here's a question. What's the difference between a stormtrooper, a sand trooper, and a snow trooper? Well, the difference is, a stormtrooper is just the basic one, a sand trooper works in the sand, and a snow trooper works in the snow. Now, I've looked up the details just to make sure I'm correct. And yeah, the snow troopers and the sand troopers have special equipment in their armor to help them deal with those environments. But if I were a businessman, and I wore mittens, that wouldn't make me a snow businessman. It just means I'm a businessman who's just working in the snow. I don't see the distinction. Except now you can sell 3 kinds of action figures, which I guess makes sense. But hey, stormtroopers, snow troopers, and scout troopers, they all have unique helmets. But what about the sand troopers? Well, they have the same helmet as the normal stormtrooper. But I guess, if I were the Empire designing these armors, I'd say, give them lighter armor so that they can breathe better in a hot environment. But rather unsurprisingly, the Empire is quite cruel, as they actually gave the sand troopers more clothing than the stormtroopers, because they have a weird little, shoulder cape thing. What's the point of that? Enough rhetorical sarcasm. Time to rebuild my reputation as someone who knows stuff about Star Wars. Because, did you know that the Death Star was actually designed by bugs? Yeah. In the prequels, it's revealed that the Death Star plans were created by the bug people of, Geonosis. The orange planet, where Tatooine is a desert, Geonosis is a mesa. Which I thought was pretty impressive, because really the only other thing you see those bug people do is poke tigers with sticks. Wait a minute, Darth Maul, Geonosis, Newt Gunray, aren't those all things from the prequels? Well, yes, thank you for asking. As I find the characters in the prequels to have a lot more memorable designs than the ones in this normal series or the sequels, even if those designs aren't really used for much. For example, battle droids. Battle droids are particularly adorable bird-headed little losers, who are usually cut down by the dozen by one single person. But that doesn't stop their design from being good. Between the stick figurine-ness of the B-1 battle droids, the more intimidating, but still equally as goofy, B-2 battle droids, which are the black ones, and the roly-poly destroyer droids, also for some reason called droidicas. However, only Newt Gunray's assistant guy calls them droidicas, and no one likes Newt Gunray, so I won't call them droidicas. Anyway, moving on. And often forgotten, as they're not used nearly as much as the other two, although I'd argue probably a bit more than the destroyer droids, because they only get one scene where they actually do something, And then an incredibly short scene after that where they do the exact same thing, and actually use their shields, and in every subsequent scene, they're in the background, not using their incredibly OP shields. I'm talking about the Magna Guards, which are the ones who protect General Grievous, hence why they are called Magna Guards. But here's a fun history fact. Remember the Magna Carta from, 4th grade history? That document that did something about kings, and it was called the Great Charter? Well, that's because Magna means great, so the Magna Guards are great guards, which is rather ironic, as they go down easier than destroyer droids, and, as we all know, General Grievous doesn't make it past the first hour of the only movie he appears in. So yeah, great job, guys. A+. Sure, you can make an argument as to why the Sand Troopers have tiny little black capes, but why do the Magna Guards have capes? They're robots. They're not going to get cold. Maybe if you haven't seen any of the Star Wars movies, you'd think I'm exaggerating with these villain deaths and how quickly they occur. But I'm not. Because honestly, there are less destroyer droids killed in the prequels than major villains who are killed. I'm not trying to insult any of your favorite Star Wars villains that may have met an unfortunate fate a little too early. I'm just saying how much I love these destroyer droids. They're cool. That's probably why they don't use their shields apart from that one scene. Because the directors must have known, alright guys, so we got this super robo-turret that can roll at 50 miles an hour, and it's basically invincible when it's not rolling. Maybe we should tone it down a bit. Or maybe they use Jedi mind tricks to make the destroyers forget that they have shields. Which would make sense. Because if the destroyer droids are programmed anything like the Scratch website, then anything just goes. 1 minute Scratch is working perfectly fine. The next minute, everything is corrupted. But then you come back a few minutes later, hey, everything's good again. We just didn't see the parts of the movie where the destroyers remembered they had shields. Because my theory is, the Separatist army mailed off the destroyer's programming to MIT. Yeah, haha, bet you didn't expect that. No one did. It was in a special edition that you just didn't see. Speaking of cool things like destroyer droids, carpet. What is a carpet? Well, much like a destroyer droid, it rolls out, and can be rolled out along a big surface. You know what else can be rolled out like that? Grass. And grass and carpet, they're really quite similar, because they can both contain bugs, they both need to be mowed multiple times a year, and they're both quite comfortable. The only main difference between grass and carpet is that there are more toilets located in areas that have grass than there are toilets that are located in areas that have carpet. Were you paying attention? This has been Billy Netro's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Hello, welcome to Billy Netro's Rant, and very fortunately for me, I did not even have to come up with a topic this time. It was fed right to me by Scratch, as on the front page, the current design studio is beaches and seashells. So why not talk about beaches and seashells? It's a free chance, let's go. However, unfortunately for me, there are no beaches nearby. As you can see, the island just sort of drops right into the ocean, so there's no beaches to stand on, which is why we are today at the docks. Because hey, docks, boats, beaches, seashells, fun. Now when I think beaches, the first thing I immediately think of is what I will not be talking about. Because I am pretty sure I mentioned beaches before, and I don't want to repeat myself, so the first thing that comes to my head is what I probably said back then, so I won't think of it. What about sports on the beach? Now, I'm not too big a fan of sports in general. However, that's great, because it's something I don't talk about as much as space, or video games, or movies, and whatever. So there's a lot more untreaded ground. Such as beach sports. What are beach sports? Well, sports primarily played on the beach, which could really be any sport, because sand is pretty much just grass without the grass. When the words beach sports are beckoned to most people, the first thing that comes to their minds, not the first thing that comes to my mind, because the first thing that I said to my mind I already minded before, but the first thing that would come to my mind is probably surfing. Which is, I don't know how that works, so I'm not going to talk about it. Something with the moon, and pulling the water. So really, surfers are just astrologers, but a whole lot more radical. Really, the second most popular beach sport besides surfing is volleyball. And rightfully so, as it is fun, and mainly just involves volleying of balls. In fact, volleyball is so popular that there are many versions of it. While not necessarily the same thing, or even probably have been designed by the same people, but sports involving some sort of net are usually more popular on beaches than other locations. Tennis, volleyball, pickleball, they're all pretty much the same thing, except with a different word and different mechanics. And, well, they're all pretty much different, but they're the same. I can only imagine what happens at the board of beach sport creationists. Alright, Susan, you said you had a good idea for the next beach sport. Yes, I do. So here's my idea. You take a net, ooh, I like where this is going already, and then you have a ball. And there are two teams on each side of the net, and you pass the ball over the net. Brilliant! Promotion! Right there. Pack it, ship it, send it. That is beach sports. And of course the naming process can't be that difficult, because you just take a word and then add ball to the end, if it involves ball. Even if it doesn't involve ball, like tennis. But tennis can get away with being called tennis because it uses those little space probe things as a ball. But it probably isn't that professional a process. Because, oh, I want to call this sport pickleball. Why do you want to call it pickleball? Well, I have a dog named Pickles. Oh, well, won't that just make everyone ask, why is it called pickleball? Why is it called pickleball? We'll get a million emails asking why it's called pickleball. Yeah, but look at my dog, it's so cute. Okay, fine, we'll name it pickleball. Another topic of beach concern is towels. Because people always seem to want to bring towels to the beach so that they can sit on the towel and not have to sit on the sand. But then the sand seeps into the towel because your weight will push the towel into the sand, causing the sand to seep in. My solution? Bring a giant vacuum cleaner and suck out all the sand in an area. Then you'll be left with a nice hole, and you can sit at whatever's at the bottom of the sand. Probably molten lava. But it'll be better than sitting on sand, because that's messy. How will you get out of the pit? I'm glad you asked. I didn't think that far. But when you do eventually get out, you can just set the vacuum cleaner to eject and launch all the sand back into the hole. Easy. Just don't do this when the tide's coming in, and you'll be fine. I hope you're not watching this episode for legitimate beach tips. As stupid as my previous idea may sound, if you're having a nice relaxing day on a rocky beach, it may help to move some of the sharp rocks out of the way. That covers the beach part of today's topic, but what about the seashells? Well, in a previous episode, of which I can't remember which one it is, I talked about the economic concerns of shelling seashells by the seashore. But what seashells did she shell by the seashore? That is a good question, because there are many kinds of shells for many kinds of animals. Some animals change in and out of their shells, like hermit crabs, as the name would imply, and some shells are permanently grafted to the animal, like turtles or tortoises. And shells have been getting a lot smaller, which is, again, impacting the economy of shelling seashells by the seashore. Because if the she in question was living about 500 million years ago, then she could just sell one of those gigantic Hephalotropulus major shells and make like $1 billion cave dollars. Free money. But no, over the years, shells have been getting smaller and smaller. And now, they're so small that they're being ground to dust and just part of the beach now. Which is some fun assimilation. But again, poor she. Snakes probably laugh at hermit crabs, as they need pathetic shells for protection. Snakes don't need any protection, except for the fact that most of them are born in peanut brittle cans. But once they eventually escape and get out into the wild and be in the grass, that's all they need, the grass. Which is why they don't like the beach. Because although I said that sand is kind of like grass, it's not really, because sand is sand and grass is grass, and snakes much prefer grass. Which is why I'm not going to be talking about snakes. There's some very special kinds of shells as well, such as the conch shell, which is special because if you blow into it, it makes a noise. The conch shell was popularized by the book Lord of the Flies, in which they used the shell to make a noise. And I don't know about you, but blowing and making noise doesn't really constitute much of anything special. Anything cone-shaped will make a noise if you blow into it. In fact, any shell you make will make a noise if you blow into it. To test this for yourself, go down to the local beach, pick up a shell, and just blow on it. It'll surely make a noise. It won't make as profound or interesting a noise, but it'll definitely make a noise. This has been Billy Nacho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna take a nice walk on the pier. See you tomorrow. Hello, welcome to Billy Nacho's Rant, and I have a rather strange follow-up for today. Remember a little while ago when I talked about how the robot effect had no uses and it was pointless? Well, you may want to sit down for this. Judging by the way I phrased that last phrase, you probably already know what the big news is. It's that I actually found a creative use for the robot effect, which I will not dilly-dally on any further. The idea came to me after recording the last episode. Or, maybe it wasn't the last one, the last one? I don't know, the one about Star Wars. And that got me thinking about lightsabers. And, wow, I'm not good at subtlety, because I'm pretty sure you can guess exactly what I'm about to tell you. Allow me to demonstrate this innovative new use for the Scratch sound editor. Now, instead of going to Target and buying a toy lightsaber to record your lightsaber sounds, you can now do it with your very own mouth. And you don't even have to rip apart a microwave and take out the transformer. So what you do is you want to make a vague lightsaber sound with your mouth, like meow, meow, ksh. And then you apply the robot effect as so. Meow, meow. And there you go, perfectly functional lightsaber sounds. It's better the more brief you are with your meows, because the longer it goes on, the more likely you are to pick up human speech patterns in your lightsabers. And although talking lightsabers would be funny, it's nowhere near as convincing.
Yo, what up, Nutface?
Tenerbot, it's been a while since, well actually no, it's only been a few days, but it's been a while since I've seen you. Why are you here? I don't like you. And I can nearly guarantee, I've told you before, to not hurt my friends.
Well, if you tell me to do something, obviously I won't do it. Basic antagonism.
Well, in that case, Tenerbot, I want you to beat up all my friends.
Dude, that's kind of not very nice.
Well, you're smarter than I thought. And wait, I thought you stopped doing the push jelly out of the way thing a while ago.
I have been trying to stop doing that. Knocking over that heavy creature is not good for my endoskeleton. I just wanted to go through my old routine, as you had just mentioned episode 1.
Oh yeah, episode 1. You know, my favorite part of episode 1 was that I didn't know who you were at the time.
Yeah, those were dark times. By the way, I would let you hurt my friends if you want to.
No, Tenderbot. Unlike the robot effect, my opinion on violence has not changed. I don't think violence is cool, even if it makes lightsaber noises.
Key how wow 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 swim wow 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 zir and wow wow leo and wow wow whoosh swish swim wow 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 kie.
Tenderbot, what the heck was that?
Well, if your stupid squirrel brain can only release dopamine via fictional combative weaponized light sword sound effects, I figured that ought to rustle your neurons. Don't you love me now?
Tenderbot, I dislike you thoroughly, utterly, completely, and finally.
Darn. My Jedi mind tricks have failed me again. So, do you have anything else planned for today's ramblings?
Nope. Hello, welcome to Billy Not Just Rant, and today I'm feeling giving. Well, not giving as in giving, but giving as in redeeming. Metaphorical giving. Because last time, I gave a redemption for the robot effect, after wronging it so many times, and honestly, rightfully so, but it does have a use. So I figured today, let's have fun with another one of Scratch's useless features, that being the Surprise Me button. For those of you who don't use Scratch, and for those of you who do use Scratch but tend to use features that aren't pointless, the Surprise Me button is a button you can press to get a random image or sound from the Scratch image and sound libraries. Wow, how fun. Why would you ever want to use this? I don't know, maybe at one point there wasn't a search bar for those things, but there is now. So unless you're doing some sort of fun exercise where you make fun of random things, then I don't really see the purpose of this. If you want a more complete coverage of the Scratch sound and image libraries, that was probably in a previous episode. Like, have fun sorting through that. Sorry. Let's listen to the first sound. Because I think making fun of sounds is a whole lot funner than making fun of pictures, as I think there is a lot more variety. That, as I'm sure only the most educated of you could have guessed, was a sound called slide whistle. You'll never guess why, because it's a slide whistle. I can see its use, as, for those who don't own a slide whistle, this can be an important sound to have in your repertoire. But for those of you who are just pulling up random sounds, I'm sure slide whistle wasn't very high on your list. For any of you audio fans, here's a fun tip. If you reverse the sound of the slide whistle, you can simulate the action of actually playing a slide whistle. If this was actually recorded during the Scratch team, and not just ripped off some old CD, then I'm genuinely curious how they got the sound. Did they give an MIT employee a microphone and then just toss him in the pool? If so, how did they get so crisp of a... And also, why do you guys have a pool in the office? Although we don't know explicitly that it was a pool, because we have no other context. So maybe MIT team was just wasting their money on a really quiet hot tub. That sound was called F trombone, meaning that I'm assuming it's a trombone playing the F key, although I know nothing about music. But I do have another question, and that is that on these instruments that have all these different letters lettered out, I'm not so sure on this trombone alphabet. A, B, C, C, D, E, F, G. Why is there C's? Why is there a C1 and a C2? It's not even a C1 and a C2, it's just a C and a C2. And if so, why not have every other letter of the alphabet? A, B, C, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. I want trombone elemento. Wow, that's a weird one. That was in the loops category. And I thought I covered all the loops, but I guess I skipped that one, because I either missed it or just didn't think it was worth talking about. But it's definitely worth talking about, because that sound was called dance space. And while not nearly as dancey as most other loops in the dance category, it's a whole lot more dancey than most of the loops in the space category. If I had to rank it on loopage, I wouldn't say it's that high. Definitely better than a lot of the other loops, but because of its whooping nature, it doesn't really loop that well, as it's pretty obvious when it repeats. It's no shepherd's tone. There's a certain antiquity to this one. I don't know if it's the sound quality, or just the fact that it sounds like one of those music cues from an old cartoon. Perhaps this is one when a character learns of some shocking information. Billy, I have found a use for the robot effect. That one's called Wand. I'm not sure why it's called Wand. It sounds much more like fairy dust to me. Oh, what's that? They already have a sound called fairy dust. Let's have a listen. Wow, what a horribly cropped sound. It's like they somehow messed up pressing stop recording too early, and pressing start recording too late. Take a listen to this. Does this sound pleasant? This is a fairy sprinkling you with its magic dusk. I'm frankly offended that a professional institution, such as the Massachusetts Institution of Technology, would mess up such a trivial and beginner's audio error. Everyone knows that you can't cut the audio. Oh, thank you, Scratch, but you can hold off celebrating my birthday until February next year. Well, that's surprising. Usually I have to size up the audio volumes to make them easier to hear, but for this sound, it just comes right out of the back. Straight block of pink. Just super loud. Say, that's a pretty realistic sound effect. I gotta hand it to you, Scratch Team. You really knocked it out of the park with that one. Well, I feel like this was a pretty bad day to do this then. See, I sent a message to Jelly this afternoon, asking her if she wanted to do an episode today. And she said, no, because she injured her foot stepping on a broken microwave that was laying outside. I'm not sure of the plausibility of that story, but she also told me that it was going to rain, which I ignored. I owe someone 2 apologies, and have nothing more to say about sound effects. This has been Billy Nature's Rant. I am very wet. Hello, welcome to Billy Nature's Rant. Have you ever felt the spontaneous urge to burn something? I mean, you probably shouldn't. And in fact, you never will. But it would be cool, as long as it's in a safe and controlled environment. I don't condone starting fires, but I don't decondone enjoying them when they happen. A little campfire, some crackers, some chocolate, without marshmallows, because those are gross, some s'mores, good times. I've been thinking a little bit about fire recently, and when I think about fire, I think about one fire in particular. One very mysterious, fictional fire. The most important aspect to a fire is fuel. Because after all, if you aren't burning anything, then you can't really be burning anything, because then the fire would just die out. Which is where this anomaly comes in. In Minecraft, it's well known that a specific block called netherrack burns forever. I'm here to tell you why this obviously impossible thing is impossible. The actual location, known as the nether, is a giant cave, which is to say that there is no sky. It's all completely indoors. Which would not only mean that because of all the smoke from all the fire and lava, would mean that the air would be toxic and unbreathable, it also means that you wouldn't be able to see anything if the nether was real, because everything would just be covered in smoke. If I left it at that, this rant would be pointless, because I don't have a point to make. Yeah, it's impossible to breathe in smoke. Yeah, it's hard to see in smoke. Who cares? What I'm trying to propose is a theory as to why netherrack is the only block that burns forever. And just to cover my bases, there are actually 2 other blocks that burn forever. The first one is magma, which, I suppose that makes enough sense. Magma does burn, and if you've seen videos of actual magma, just like pouring down a mountainside, whatever you touch, it burns, and it sets it on fire. So I think that's realistic enough. And the other one, which I think makes enough sense, is soul soil, which, obviously, is soil made of souls. The fuel source is obvious here, and I will try it next campout. I will now propose my theory as to why netherrack never burns. My theory is that netherrack isn't actually a rock, because after all, it's not called nether rock. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have thought of this. But the reason that netherrack never burns is because perhaps, maybe, it is not a sedimentary or volcanic or erodiary or any other kind of rock. I think it's actually a whole bunch of small microorganisms that are all constantly reproducing to form the shape of netherrack, but who also don't survive very long in the heat, so that's why they all never expand. And they just keep getting burnt forever and forever and forever, because they reproduce so fast, but they also get burned equally as fast, so it's an equilibrium. After all, according to the Minecraft wiki, there is a kind of fungus in the nether that doesn't burn, called nylium, which also grows on top of netherrack. So maybe nylium and netherrack have a symbiotic relationship, where netherrack provides a surface for the nylium to grow, and the nylium protects the netherrack from being burned forever. Which also makes sense why nylium can spread, and why netherrack cannot spread. And I've already thought about this more than the people who made the game. But wait a minute, netherrack can actually be burned in a furnace, and if you burn it in a furnace, you get a nether brick. What the heck is a nether brick? Well, it's what the nether fortresses are made of. A nether fortress is a very evil place. In fact, the achievement for reaching one is called a terrible fortress. And what's so terrible about the fortress? Well, it has, skeletons and stuff. But those skeletons, they don't really do much that would make them terrible. Sure, they're hostile, but everything else is hostile. So what exactly about the fortress is so terrible? Well, perhaps these skeletons have found a way to build a fortress out of all of these dead organisms that they've burnt up and formed into bricks. Further cementing my theory is the existence of red nether bricks, which is a combination of normal nether bricks and nether wart, which is the thing that's grown inside the fortress, and it actually grows on top of soul sand, further adding to the terribleness of the fortress, and the symbiotic properties of netherrack, because it not only has a good relationship with nylium in life, it has a good relationship with nether wart in death. And the reason that nether bricks don't burn forever is that they've already been destroyed inside of a furnace, the organisms that is, so they can't constantly reproduce, and they can't constantly keep fueling the flame. And that is my fictional proposition for why netherrack burns forever. Whether or not you believe me is up to you. This means if netherrack was real, in the real world, it would only take one block to pretty much ruin the entire planet, because it would spread so quickly. Because unless it's being constantly burnt, then it'll just spread forever. In all directions. So the only way to contain it would be to set it all on fire, and then throw it in a really big furnace. I think that would make a good movie. Oh, and just in case you thought that the nether might be inhabitable, any water that's put in the nether automatically burns up, and not even to, mist, like water would in the real world. No, black smoke. It turns water to black smoke, which means somehow it burnt the water. I'm no 5-star chef, but even I find it difficult to burn water. Your pasta is served, sir. Oh yeah, I just have one complaint. The water is burnt, and also the pasta is a little singed. Have you ever noticed that fired is used in speech a lot? Like, you're fired from your job because you burnt my water. But no one ever says watered to someone else. It's not the opposite of fired. And sure, you can water plants, but you don't usually say watered to people. You know what, on second thought, I take it back. For example, what are you talking about, Billy Nut Joe? This has been Billy Nut Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Hello, welcome to Billy Nut Joe's Rant, and today I have a rather fun experiment. In fact, it's so fun, it's infuriating. It's infuriating because it's extremely difficult, and the task I'm alluding to does not really have a name, so I'll call it the definition game. The way to play is quite simple, and in fact, you may have already played it before if you got into semantics while in an argument over someone on the internet. The way to play the game is simple. I give a word, and you have to come up with a definition that fits only that word. It's extra fun if you have a friend to play with who can tell you just how wrong your definitions are. I'm nearly positive that this game has something to do with philosophy and the nature of life or whatever, but honestly I don't care. I just think it's fun. And before we start playing, I'd just like to say as a disclaimer, if you actually do use the definition game as a part of your argument, you are, as the ancient philosophers would say, como se dice, a big jerkface. In addition, it's quite paradoxical to attempt to win an argument by presenting a nearly unwinnable game, as the win and lose conditions are entirely up to the person who first proposed the game. With that being said, let's have some fun. Let's start with an easy one. Well, at least easy for a game that can't be beaten. What is a sandwich? If right now you were to search up what is a sandwich, you would bring the following result. An item of food consisting of 2 pieces of bread with meat, cheese, or other fillings between them, eaten as a light meal. Before I give my own definition of a sandwich, I would like to point out why this definition is not going to pass the definition game, by any stretch of the imagination. First off, eaten as a light meal. The definition of a sandwich should not be so limiting that it's just a light meal, because what if it's a really big sandwich? And first off, instead of just saying other fillings between them, which would make more sense, it narrows it to saying specifically meat, cheese, which again is not necessarily essential to making a sandwich. And it also says an item of food, of which I'm pretty sure that sandwich... Okay, maybe that one's actually good. My initial definition for what is a sandwich would be food consisting of pieces of edible material pressed between others of varying amounts and similarities in a spatially sensible confined area. Allow me to run through my thought process. First off, food, because obviously a sandwich is edible, consisting of pieces of edible material, that referring to the outer layers, because if I just said bread, that would leave out ice cream sandwiches, which are undoubtedly a kind of sandwich, pressed between others of varying amounts and similarities. That is referring to the food, or filling, inside of the sandwich. And I say varying amounts and similarities because you could have very few things in a sandwich or a whole lot of things in a sandwich. It's still a sandwich. And the reason I say similarities is because you can have a piece of bread somewhere in the middle of the sandwich, which would not negate its sandwiching properties. In a spatially sensible confined area. I added in this last one so that you couldn't say, well, if I put a piece of bread at the top of the earth and a piece of bread at the bottom of the earth, would that make the whole earth a sandwich because it technically has edible material between those 2 pieces of bread? No, because that is not a spatially sensible confined area. That is an entire planet. And this also excludes nachos, because you could technically say that the 2 chips count as the bread and the cheese count as the filling, but then again, nachos come in a massive package, which is not necessarily spatially confined to 2 single nachos that can be combined to make a sandwich. Although you could technically make a sandwich out of nachos, but just the concept of eating nachos is not the same as eating a sandwich, if you catch my drift. If there's any way to add on or restrict that definition to fit more sandwiches, then I would be happy to know. But as for now, I'm satisfied with that definition. Which is why I said it's an easy one. Let's move on to a more difficult one. What is the definition of water? My original definition for what is water would be a most oftentimes liquid substance in which a single microscopic morsel is consisting of one oxygen molecule tightly bonded to an additional two hydrogen molecules, with each molecule type consisting of opposite polarities that can also take the form of a gas or solid given the right temperatures and conditions. I find that to be a relatively straightforward and inarguable definition for water. Although again, if someone has a better one, I'd like to hear it, please. Unrelated, but I would like to express my gratitude for the word jaunt. J-A-U-N-T. Look it up right now. Noun, a short excursion or journey for pleasure. Verb, go on a short excursion or journey for pleasure. So it, being a noun and a verb, purely consists of tense. With the noun being past tense, as in I went for a jaunt, or I guess you could say I'm currently going on a jaunt, but then you could just say I am currently jaunting, which would be the verb definition, which is present tense, making jaunt an incredibly weird word. Now you could argue that what I just said is complete nonsense by using the word jaunt in a noun form in the present tense. However, that would make you a total nerd as you just used the word jaunt in a sentence. On the topic of unrelated things, have you ever considered that the word huddle might be a portmanteau of hug and cuddle? Isn't that adorable? Anyway, with my massively variable flexibility and credibility, let's move on to the next word to define. This one's gonna be real tough. How about define happiness? That one is quite tough and is a real thinker. So I did some real thinking, and my original definition for what is happiness is the state of a living being to release above average amounts of dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins in their brain in response to an or internal realization, recollection, or event. Now, is that a good definition of happiness? No, not really, because I'm nearly certain that same definition could be applied to gambling. But, rather ironically, trying to come up with a definition of happiness causes one to be unhappy, because it's quite fussy. How do you feel about this game, Peanut Butter and Blank? Yeah, I think that too. And I hope you two, as well, have thinked the things that we have thoughted. This has been Billy Nacho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Have fun and stuff. Yep. Hello, welcome to Billy Nacho's Rant. I'd like to start this one off with some rather happy news. Scratch Labs, which is a part of Scratch where they test new features that they might eventually add to the actual Scratch, although they haven't actually been doing that, and I've never done it ever, but it's a possibility. And in their new one, they have added something that I've actually asked for in a previous episode. Which one? I don't know. I'm not going to go through them. And that is a sort of almost, maybe, kinda green screen effect, where you can mask out a certain color in a sprite and replace it with, and here's the catch, live video feed. Yes, because everything in Scratch Labs has to have something to do with the camera. It has to be some gimmicky knick-knack that someone will play with once and then never use in a project, because it's pretty pointless. What I wanted was this same thing, but instead of filling with a camera, it would just make it transparent. But hey, this shows that they do have the technology. They would just rather make goofy little things for, whoever uses Scratch Labs. I'm sure there's at least 2 people. And unlike some of the other face video sensing extensions on Scratch Labs, like the one where it can make sprites track your face, like they can go to your eyes or your nose or between your eyes or something, that might be used for a game. I have no idea what this green screen thing is supposed to be used for, because it's not like it can actually detect where you are, unlike that other one. It just sort of masks things. The only use I could possibly see is if you wanted to draw a completely real-to-life recreation of the room in front of your webcam, so you turn on the webcam and use the color picker on the live video to try to figure out what color things in your room are. But that's also why we have these things called eyes, which allow us to see what color things are. I'm not sure if the Scratch team knew that. I'm just throwing it out there for your next extension. I mean, at this point, why not just make the website a living organism? I've already said before how it has a way of just fixing itself randomly when things go wrong, and now it has eyes. So why not go all out? Why not add a sound extension? Oh wait, they already have that. Why not add a taste extension? Oh wait, they have that extension that plugs into bananas and allows you to play games with bananas. Surely they don't have a smell extension. That should be their next project. If you thought the touching color blank block was fun, just wait until you see the smelling scent blank block. This is going to be real innovative. On a slightly more serious note, if you actually want to have a color picker for your webcam in Scratch, you can already do that with the basic webcam extension. Just turn it on and use the touching color blank block to color pick what you want, which makes this new extension completely pointless. But hey, it's fun, whatever. Much like scratch.mit.edu, sometimes nature makes mistakes. But other times, nature makes, let's just say, strange choices. And yeah, I've talked about other strange animals like blobfishes or dodo birds, but this animal, this recently discovered extinct animal, this is by far the strangest one. I present to you the P. colossus. Yes, that's its name. That's the name they chose. The P. colossus, or Perusitas colossus, as it's actually called, as it's just spelled P. colossus, as sort of like an initialization of its first name. But, however, it is the only member of this Perusitas group of animals, which can only lead to the conclusion that they made up this word just so they can call this thing a P. colossus. Which, yeah, it was the right choice. So, as always, I encourage you right now to look up P. colossus and just bask in this creature's beautifulness. And now, according to scientists, this thing lived in shallow waters, which was probably one of the reasons why it is now extinct, along with a few other reasons I'll bring up shortly. And this thing is well known as being supposedly the world's heaviest animal, even bigger than the blue whale. Although no one knows this for sure, as, it's dead. But essentially, the main thing about P. colossus is that it was like a manatee. Big, heavy, and it uses its tiny little cute little arms to walk along the seafloor and just, scoop up mollusks or something. But what the manatees don't have, that the P. colossus does have, that makes it quite interesting, are back legs. Yeah, if you zoom really deep onto any picture of a P. colossus near its tail, you'll see a tiny set of back legs. What could those back legs possibly be used for? Surely they can't touch the floor. And you could argue, well, maybe it's just part of it, like its pelvis. Maybe those aren't legs, but last time I checked, my pelvis didn't have toes. Does your pelvis have toes? No. So why does this thing's pelvis have toes? Unless it's not a pelvis, and it's actually its back legs. But why? Why would it have back legs? The only logical solution I can think of is that this thing eventually, evolved into whales that actually have complete skeletons, and this thing was some sort of precursor to some four-legged aquatic creature that may eventually have evolved into some sort of whale-like creature. But that's all just speculation. I'm no P. colossusologist. And I've tried to find solid scientific evidence for why the P. colossus has tiny little legs, but no one will tell me. Either that or am I just a really bad researcher, which I am. But surely, this thing should be known for more than just its weight. I mean, P. colossus, it's the fattest animal on Earth, bigger than the blue whale. Yeah, but P. colossus is a beautiful creature and should be appreciated for more than just its weight. I'd like to raise awareness for the P. colossus because if scientists ever find a way to bring back extinct animals, which I hope they don't because that sounds scary, P. colossus is not going to be very high on the waiting list because nobody really cares about them or even knows about them. So I'm here right now to say, tell all your friends about the P. colossus. Hopefully some of your friends are future biologists. You have a history report due on some sort of prehistoric creature? All your friends are picking Tyrannosaurus, Velociraptor. Those things suck. Pick the P. colossus. It's obviously the best choice. Plus, if the P. colossus were revived from the dead, then we can actually see if it was the fattest animal on Earth, or if these paleontologists that discovered it just really didn't like blue whales. Do I believe that P. colossuses once roamed the Earth? Honestly, unfortunately, not really. Because you remember back in the medieval times when people would find dinosaur bones and be like, whoa, it's dragon bones, because we found dinosaur bones and these bones next to it that kind of look like wings? Yeah, I think that might have been what happened to P. colossus. Again, this is just speculation, and I really hope that this thing's real, but, I mean, those tiny back legs, it just doesn't make sense. Plus, you just have the skeleton. How do you know how fat something is just by looking at a skeleton? And if you're a fan of blue whales, don't worry. Blue whales are still the biggest animal in existence, because for all we know, P. colossus is fiction. Really, really good fiction. But even if it is real, it's not alive anymore. Blue whale still wins. I wish I was a paleontologist so that I could confirm the existence of P. colossus, but I'm not. I'm just a squirrel. A squirrel who says this has been Billy Netzo's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Oh, hi there, Mr. Vertihals. What are you up to?
Oh, hi. I'm just using my executive powers of supervision. I want to make sure that Fwim and Alice don't mess up my elevators moving all her stuff upstairs.
Oh, okay. That's nice of you.
Yeah, I do nice things sometimes. It's quite polarizing.
So, I'm curious, is Fwim his first name or his last name?
Yeah, it's weird, right? I mean, I hired the guy and I don't even know.